While October conjures pumpkin spice feelings and welcomes sweater weather, October holds a special place in the LGBTQ community as we observe Gay History Month in the United States. In this episode, we talk to Gilbert Salazar, who was a pioneer in the gay community in El Paso.
Having worked and performed in some of El Paso's earliest gay bars, Gilbert would become a manager and then owner of the Old Plantation nightclub. He also picked up a couple of crowns along the way. In this episode, that we call A Little Respect, we talk to Gilbert about the history of the queer community in El Paso. Those of you who have had the pleasure of meeting Gilbert know that he is never short of stories or shade. Our guest today is Gilbert Salazar, who is, as many of you know, an icon of the gay community in El Paso.
I don't know about that.
Well, I say that with a great deal of respect. Is he? Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, absolutely, yes.
And so we're talking to you about October being LGBTQ History Month. And one of the important things to understand about us observing queer history is that we're not in history books. We're not taught to people as part of the overall fabric of America. We're kind of this forgotten history. And so it got us thinking about what was the history of El Paso's LGBTQ community. And we immediately thought of you because honestly, you date back to the Stonewall era, and yes. El Paso was so removed from all of that. So your perspective is actually very unique. So tell us a little bit about, one, how you started, how you came out, and then what was your first experiences into the gay community in El Paso and how different that was from what we have today?
I think I've always been out. I think my first boyfriend was in first grade. So I had no problems. My parents had not very hard time. They knew automatic. So they were pretty supportive as much as they could be, being, a Hispanic couple, Latino couple. But it was amazing. I came out at a time where it was very underground, and that made it very exciting, sexually exciting, and an exciting period. I came out at a time where the older queens, the generation before me, were, yes, bitchy and sometimes gave you a hard time, but only to make you stronger. They would support you immensely. They told you their stories and how it used to be, taught you how to maneuver the craziness of the gay life,
And really, those were your touch points, because there was nothing in the media. There was nothing that you could really look up or refer to. There wasn't social media back then. So these people were truly the kind of torchbearers, the light bearers for
yes.
the younger generation. And you were, as I gather, very young when you started
18.
to come out. 18. And so tell me, and we've often talked about that, is about how we enjoy today, kind of fast forwarding from our history, but we enjoy today a lot more visibility and freedoms. But there was something to being
subversive,
right?
It was exciting. Yeah, it was exciting.
One of the things that we always talk about is that, it was just exciting to speak of the energy, that there was something kind of taboo, and we were doing things that we shouldn't be doing, but it was also very exciting. And I understand that allure. And so how did you unravel into the gay community? What was it that you started to just embrace this and became a really big part of your life?
Well, I would imagine when I started working, that's when Rose, nudged me over into doing drag, and then that became a second money-making little career that I did well on. And it was just the older queens. I have to give them so much props, because they were, bitchy, like I said, bitchy, but so supportive in their own way, and they just took you by the hand and help you, move on healthy and spiritually, mentally.
Right.
They're the ones that told me it wasn't wrong. Street queens too, because there was a time where there were hassles, and I went through some bullies in the drag community, but the street queens were always the ones that had my back, and everyone was afraid of them because they were so tough and they survived on the streets. And I remember one particularly, I will never forget to this day, I think about her constantly. Her name was Norma. She came from San Francisco. She was originally from El Paso. She had moved to San Francisco, and she came to visit one year her mom. But that woman had my back like you wouldn't believe. She sought out the people that were giving me a hard time when I told her about it and took care of business, and they never bothered me again. Along with that taboo excitement was also, we were all together and a true community. And you've got to remember, not that many people went to the bars. There weren't that many bars, and they were small. So everybody knew each other, which is, I think, one of the reasons we never had a bathhouse in this town, because who was going to go except everybody else? Everybody you knew, la comadres.
Nothing new to see. You might as well have just been at happy hour.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's fascinating, because one of the things that's been proven, or that people will celebrate now, is that if it weren't for the drag queens that take to the streets in New York City and at the Stonewall that stood up against the police officers and that kind of abuse. I mean, here they were, the victims of bullying and ridicule, but they turned out to be the toughest, the smartest, the most vocal, just to stand up and be counted. And so it's very encouraging to hear that was exactly what was happening here in El Paso as well.
And they were just as much an activist as the queens in Stonewall. Because especially, the drag queens would tell me when they did their shows. Gilbert Varela, he ran the Pig Owl, a very important person in the city. He would do. He was the only one that did drag with his mustache still on, and he did comedy drag, and he was hysterically funny and was a great mentor. Took care of me so well. But they would tell me stories about when they had drag shows and they were called out by the police and hauled out of the bars and put in the cars, and how they fought back. And
I was like, that's something I would never have heard of here in El Paso. Like, where would that even have occurred?
Pig Owl.
Pig Owl.
Yes.
That was a club.
That was the name of the Pig Owl.
Oh,
Run
okay.
by, what was his name?
A club downtown?
Downtown on Franklin Street.
Yeah.
That federal building.
That federal building right there.
The federal building. Thank you. That's the word I was looking for. That federal. It was on that block, across the alley from it. There was the hidden door, which was a real weird dive, it was a straight dive, but you could always pick up a trick or two there. And right next to the Pig Owl was a bar, and I don't remember the name, but it was a Puerto Rican bar, owned by, and patronized by Puerto Ricans. So you could get some good trade there. But I never did. I mean, you're not going to believe this, but I was a virgin till I was 20.
Really?
Mm-hmm. I decided to just...
So you had been working at the bars already, and
that was before
you started working. But you were going to the bars, and you were saving your virtue for what exactly?
Just because I just knew instinctively that I wasn't ready. I mean, I played around and did a little bit of stuff here and there, but I never went out full throttle. But I just don't know. It was instinctively that I just decided to wait until I had my first gay lover in the bar. And he was real strange with him. His name was Simon Montoya. I'll never forget him. He's in California now. I met him at a house party. I met him at a house party, and then we went outside and did some nasty stuff in a little playhouse they had out there. After we were done, he says, "You don't remember me, do you?" And I go, "No, I don't think I've met you before." He goes, "I'm the kid that used to walk you home from 6th grade every day until we moved." I met him in the 6th grade, and he used to walk me home.
Wow.
Every day. And we ended up hooking up, and we were together for a couple of years.
That's an amazing story.
That's hard to achieve.
That brings to mind a little sidebar. What's interesting is that you talked about how everybody knew everybody. It was a very small community, and there's something about all of the outsiders created their own inside. So we were, the gay community was very kind of cloistered, and we had to be for protection. Yes. But also, despite everything else, despite all the lewd thoughts that it would evoke and all the kind of taboo ideas, it really created the opportunity for some very important relationships and some real bonds between men in particular.
Oh, of course, yeah.
And it sounds to me like your first relationship actually, I mean, just kind of reflected that.
I would agree, yeah. But it's always been, most of my relationships have been kismet. One time I went to when they used to close the entire block around the Civic Center and have a big festival, Lucha Villa would perform free. You only paid to get into the festival. Lucha Villa and several other bands, country western band, and everything. I walked into the art show, to the art exhibit, and I turned around and I saw this one pencil and ink drawing of a huge cross, and it caught my attention. And I go, damn, I'd like to buck that artist. A couple of years later, I'm working the tending bar at the mining company, and I picked up this bearded guy who I thought was real cute. We went to his house on Wheeling Street, towards the top near Scenic Drive. He tells me, hold on, for some real weird reason, the light switch is on the other side of the living room. It was, in fact, stand by the window and wait. And so, by the door, and he left the door open so there was sunlight going. So I'm looking out the door, and the lights go on, and I turn to my left, and that drawing is on the wall. And I say, who's the artist that did that? That's me. I did that. Wow. And we dated for a year or two.
Wow.
So it's been kismet.
And almost manifesting when you said, I'd like to fuck that artist.
Yeah.
And there you were, a couple of years later. You know, you're giving a lot of young queens a lot of hope.
Well, good. I remember being young and how lost and how confused you are, and it's up to us elders to teach and to bring them into the world. They don't need us so much now.
Right. Speaking of which, so let's talk a little bit about how you began doing drag. What drew you into it? And we are, I would tell our audience that we're talking to the very first Miss Old Plantation that was crowned. And so obviously you had some rise. So tell us about your first experiences doing drag and what that was like, and then how you ended up, becoming Miss Opie.
And also your drag name.
Yeah.
I've always went by Gilbert, but Matt several years ago, gave me the name Cherry Forever. And I proudly wore
That is a great one.
Cherry Forever. Yeah, and let's see, Rose Quintana. We hung around, we became super close. We hit all the small bars and hustled for drinks and stuff, and entertained people. And the Lemon Lords. Remind me to tell you about that part.
Lemon Lords?
Les Milords.
Les Milords.
Pepe Acosta owned it. He had spent several times. He spent several years in Paris. A fantastic singer. And since Rose was an opera singer, they got along very well. It was a very tiny bar over the old mining company is across the street in the Toltec building. Very tiny bar, done up like a Parisian apartment. He let anybody in. He didn't care how old you were. I met people who were 14 there. And if we talked him out, if we got him drunk enough and stroked him enough, he would sing for you, and his favorite song was Alla Di La. And he had the most amazing, beautiful voice. It was a great stuff. Now, where was it? Drag. So Rose and I were sisters and hung out a lot, every single day, actually. And she was very popular when she got hired at the pet shop down on San Antonio. It's on San Antonio. At the pet shop there. And then I was hired. But before that, even she put me up in drag for one Halloween at the Pigalle, and I liked it because, like I said, I had been hanging out with the street queens and learning from them and stuff, and I found it fascinating. And there was one, Sonia, she was a beautiful Oriental-looking guy. He ended up in Oakland. I wonder what happened. Maybe I hope he's still alive. And I thought she was fascinating because very little makeup, but looked very feminine and beautiful. So I tried it with Sonia's help and Rose's help, and the rest is history. I was very bad, lost the Miss Big Al pageant, but years later, when I first won Miss Pet Shop, I beat the girl that won Miss Big Al, and she threw up. Embarrassing. It was embarrassing. So that's it. I even did drag when mind you, mind you, all this time I was drinking heavily. I was a bad alcoholic. I didn't stop drinking until November 7th, 1977. So I was still drinking. I won this when I won Miss Pet Shop in 1976. But due to my drinking, I would get fired from the pet shop as a waiter and thrown out completely. And then I'd go to the apartment bar, which was 2 blocks away on, I'll remember the name of the street, 2 blocks away down a little further east, 2 blocks away. Another small bar, and it was called the apartment bar because the owner, Hardy, German, had an apartment in the back of the bar. Very nicely, tastefully done in Oriental motif. But I would do drag there for drinks. And that's where I met Melvina, who was, I think, the first Miss Pet Shop. Mel, her name was Melanie, but I called her Melvina. And Gussie was in her late 50s to middle 60s. Heavy, and her favorite, the song she would do almost every time was 40 cups of coffee. Have you ever heard that one?
No.
Wait, 3 a.m. or something like that. It's 3 a.m. I'm waiting for you. 40 cups of coffee. It's a Georgia song, waiting about something.
I love it.
Yes, and old and dressed her age. She didn't dress super glamorous. She dressed like a well-dressed 58-year-old woman. Melvina wore the most outrageous costumes. Not costumes, dresses. She preferred cocktail dresses. Beautiful. She worked for Sears. She worked in the layaway department at Sears, so she always bought her cocktail dresses at Sears. Talk about teachers. Very welcoming to me. There I am in a one-piece little lace bathing suit with a long lace Spanish shawl wrapped around, doing Bette Midler at the apartment bar. And from there, what happened was the crowd started getting bigger and bigger because I don't brag, but I think it was pretty good. And it's all of a sudden the place was packed and Hardy was making a fortune. And we didn't get paid. We got paid drink tickets for the whole week. Well, we could basically drink for free all week, and on Sundays he had T-bone steak cookouts, and we got free meals. But it started and Bob Bonnet realized his mistake about getting rid of me, and I was asked to go back to the pet shop, which was the precursor to the Old Plantation.
And so talk about the type of crowd that started going. Now, fast forward just a little bit, because it sounds like that's right around the time that the Old Plantation, the very first iteration, not the one that maybe the younger generation does, but the first Old Plantation. What was that crowd like? And what was that experience like when the bar first opened?
Okay, let me preface to say this. First, it was the pet shop on San Antonio. Then we got too busy. It got too popular because that one drunk manager from Dallas, Love Unlimited, the band, the group or the songs, the first disco that ever came out, what was considered disco, he's played it at the pet shop downstairs. And that's when disco was born in El Paso. It got so packed that we had to move to where the San Antonio Mining Company is. That was the original pet shop. And then that got so packed, and I had a lot to do with it because, I wasn't the highest paid queen, even though it wasn't much, queen in the business, but for no reason, because my Sunday shows were hugely popular. We got so packed that he had moved to the original Old Plantation across the street from the new one. That great building across the street was small. We were there until it got so packed that the balcony, even though almost collapsed, it cracked one Halloween.
So one of the PBS did a documentary on the history of disco, and it is well known that the gays helped put disco on the map.
Well, no, they didn't help. They did it.
And even straight people were drawn to the music, and everybody knew that this is where you wanted, if you wanted nightlife.
The original OP is when straight started, the Queen started, all the pretty guys, Queen started bringing all their girlfriends, their straight girlfriends down. And they were wonderful to me. You know, they were so good to me. So they would lend me their gowns, their dress, anything I wanted, you know. And we'd have a dance contest, a disco dance contest on Thursdays that was emceed by Steve Crosno. And that's when the straights started flocking to the bar. Because, I mean, come on, let's face it, Studio 54 was a gay bar.
Yes.
That brought in all the straights and especially the big old stars. It was just a small Studio 54, but we weren't as strict at the door. But yeah, that's how that whole disco thing started. Yeah.
So, tell us a little bit about a typical night at the OP now. In the 70s, Steve Crosno's there. I mean,
Thursdays with Steve Crosno's. When the disco was falling down, going down, Steve Crosno, then he did the male strip contest on Thursday nights. I mean, he worked even when I managed it, and we just didn't get along very well. But we just worked it. We had to work it because we were both making money at it. So, you know. So it was a typical night. It was open 7 days a week, you know. Wednesdays were some crazy drink special, and Thursdays were, Fridays, Saturdays, you didn't need to come on. It was good because it was a weekend. And Sundays they'd haul me out to bring in the crowd on. And I was used to having that place to bring in, whenever I did a show, I would bring, it was guaranteed we'd have 200 to 300 people.
Right.
It got to the point where Rose got to be real director, and I'd have to do entire albums, like Broadway albums. We'd do the costumes and the dances and everything.
Oh my gosh.
Wow. And I'd be starring, here we go, Liza Minnelli, Cabaret, my biggest one. My favorite one, actually. Yeah.
And that would have been wonderful.
It was the shows were amazing. People loved them, after I was, they were always good. They were, and then we started bringing the out-of-town queens.
Right.
Because I retired. Not because of that, but,
Well, and that's kind of drag kind of grew up a little bit, too, because there had already been a period of time where people kind of got hip to what was going on, and so other queens from other cities wanted to perform and keep performing, and so it became bigger at that point. What year did you win Miss OP?
1978.
And did you go compete somewhere else, or was it just...
I went to Miss Gay, Texas twice.
Excellent. So tell us about that.
It was awful. I wasn't prepared. I used it as an excuse to party and travel, and have a good time. And I went in 76 when I was Miss Pet Shop. And Donna Day, nobody remembers Donna Day, an amazing black performer, just amazing comedy. She was huge. Helped me out as much as she could. And but was too polite to tell me you're going at it wrong, girl. and then I went in 78 and went with a group of friends and spent time at the baths and did all sorts. In 76 I did better. I came in 17th out of 42, which is okay for not doing much, for not giving a shit. And I don't remember exactly what it wasn't held at a bar in 78. It was at a hall, some kind of banquet hall, and I didn't have a good time. There was a lot of thieving going on, and the best thing that happened to me there was that right behind me in the line in the parade of contestants was hot chocolate. and I love hot chocolate. And we stayed in touch. I lost touch with her when I dumped a friend of mine in LA who would design the light and sound equipment in LA. He was a Grammy winner, and I'd go to Vegas sometimes, or I'd see Chocolate and with him and in LA. He had his own little plane. But it was a propeller one, but he was always flying down to see me when I became the owner.
So just to clarify, Hot Chocolate was another performer. I'm like, everybody loves hot chocolate, but okay.
Yeah, she's working. I think she's still doing the door at Iguanas, and for years she worked as in La Cage.
Okay.
In Las Vegas, which was, I can't remember the main queen's name, but
I remember that show. The Cage.
For years, she worked with in the Stardust with that show, Chocolate, until she got fired one year because the head queen was upset with her. And used a bullshit excuse to fire. But she's back doing it.
Really?
She's a hustler, honey. Hot Chocolate.
I'm gonna look her up.
She's a hustler. She does all sorts of stuff to stay alive and to put her name in the business. Keep her name in the entertainment business. She even was one of the queens. She impersonates Tina Turner.
Oh, wow.
And she was Miss Gay USA and Miss Gay America.
Wow.
So was my idol, Michael Andrews. I'll tell you about her. And she was in the movie. The one with Sandra Bullock and Regina King, for their
Miss Congeniality
2.
Yeah.
She was one of the Tinas in that show.
Really?
Oh. Yes. She was always in everything. She's been in several movies and spin parts. She's always hustling to get her name out there. Still to this day. Amazing.
So you made long-lasting relationships from those
I'll tell you one thing. Hot Chocolate is the kindest person in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Never has a bad word to say about anyone. I mean, and I've brought it up, little reading sessions, and she will never say a bad word about anyone. Treats you like gold. One time, the first time I went to see her, I visited with her in Vegas with Howard. That's the guy in LA. I was there to do a queen's makeup for her wedding. And Hot Chocolate said, "Girl, you're not going nowhere. Let's go. Come on, I got things to show you." Since she worked there for so many years, we went to see every, you know how they have those, like the water dances, the pirate show at the whatever, I don't remember, the hotel. I've stayed there a couple of times. All those shows in Caesar's Palace, they have that huge waterfront that comes alive and all that. We went to see in one night, because I was only there one night for the makeup job. In one night, we saw them all, night and a day, 28 hours, all head on. Great place to see it, because we went through she took me through all the kitchens, all the hallways, the underground hallways, the different hotels. Yeah, just see this stuff. Out of the kindness of her heart, Vanessa.
I'm sorry. That was what I was thinking about. That was mentoring, and that's something that it sounds like the drag community is always really.
Well, we weren't. It wasn't mentoring. We were equals by then. We knew who we were. We had first done. She saw me at my worst in drag. I saw her at her best, and we were just. It was good. Jacqueline Akonsky is still in touch with her, and it's a very good friend of hers.
I've known a couple of drag queens in my life that stand out, and it's because of their kindness. One of the things that we associate very easily with being a drag queen is throwing shade and being bitchy and just tearing somebody down. But I find that there are always those that just rise to the top by just being genuine and understanding that difference, and that's probably why she's still.
Well, she's the only one I know that ain't bitch. But everyone, but I've known a lot of them, like you describe, but still have a heart of gold and help you.
Right.
Michael Andrews was real big, and she made some really good movies in the 80s in drag. She was an Anne Margaret impersonator. And did you know Michelangelo?
No. That reference, Anne Margaret, I understand.
Good. Not many people do.
Mm-hmm.
But it was the spitting image. No padding, no nothing. Just beautiful. Another Miss Gay America, and Miss Gay USA. Big star. Did Vegas for a while, but it wasn't, the Lacage was not born yet. A very handsome, very wealthy man opened Lacage in California, outside of LA. And he was in love with Michael Andrews. And this was a venue built for Michael Andrews. And she was the headliner. She did Anne Margaret to a T, and Olivia Newton-John very well. She came down to El Paso as a guest at a bar called Whispers. You remember Whispers?
Yes, I do.
She was the headliner there. Well, the day before, on Memorial, I think it was a holiday, Memorial Day or Labor Day, I don't know which one. Before that, she went to see the show Miss OP, the Miss Old Plantation contest. And I was dragged out of retirement to be the entertainer, me and Henry Lewis. And she saw me do my Lena Horne impersonation thing. I did a huge thing, Lena Horne thing, because I love Lena Horne. And later on, we all went. She went with the group that I was in to the mining company. I was offered an audition to Lacage in LA. On audition, she goes, "Don't worry, I'm the owner. You got it." But I never went. I never
Really?
carried on with it. I was interrupted and we didn't finish the conversation. And I was reluctant to finish the conversation because I didn't know how to tell her I'm not interested.
Right.
That wasn't my path. I knew it. I've always lived by my instincts, and they've done me well. And I knew that was not my path. I would have been dead by now. That's how she died. She died of AIDS.
Right.
Poor thing. God rest her soul for beauty.
So, kind of taking a turn to some of the not so fun things, but tell us a little bit about, you became eventually assistant manager and then manager of the Old Plantation, and you were there during the transition from the old OP to the new OP, which is a building that some of our listeners probably know now. So, managing the bar, running a business in El Paso, a gay-owned business, a visibly gay business. What bad experiences did you have in our community? Were there any things that happened that were a persistent problem for you, or a challenge that was specifically unique to running a gay business or a gay nightclub?
Well, I can't really say yes. I mean, don't forget, I've been through it all. I started hanging at the bars during the hippie movement. Moved on to the first the disco, then the Castro look, and then AIDS threw everything apart.
Yes.
It threw everything apart. So, and then the surviving of that. So, as far as the police, we were harassed a couple of times, but once Bob and I went to Internal Affairs and talked to them, complain or whatever. I cannot complain about the police. Overall, because they left us. They would check us and did what they had to do. They did their job, but they didn't harass us. And it might have happened to some of the troublemakers out in the street that would hang out there. The police were always rather supportive.
And the community in general didn't go out and seek ways to harass.
There were a couple of troublemakers that would go and beat up the queers, but I consider those people, those self-hating, deeply closeted men. Yes. There's always some of that in any bar, right, in the city. So I cannot say it was because of the gay thing.
It was targeted specifically for that. Yeah.
When I worked the pet shop downstairs in Barrett, at least once a week, this gang of cholos would come down the stairs to start a fight, and Rose would have her blackjack ready. We'd have our spray bottles with hot water and hot sauce in it, and we'd engage with them. But it wasn't to hurt us. It was just a lark, a sick lark. But we'd throw them out. We'd beat them and throw them out, and no repercussions.
It's like
They
they came in
just
just
go.
for the clout or something.
Yeah, just to try to claim the term, but no, sorry, honey, we're here to stay. And they would just no recriminations, no nothing, no vengeance, nothing. They'd leave. Then a few weeks later, they'd come back down, and there we go, and then they'd leave, and never bother anybody after that.
Interesting. I think that's kind of what I was talking about. I think the younger generation, they have no idea what it was like to be prepared for something like that. Although it was rare, and it probably wasn't as violent or serious as it may be in other cities, but I think that's true of El Paso. I think El Paso is a very tolerant place for the most part.
Very. You know what I call El Paso? I call it the Latino Shangri-La. Every time I write about El Paso or say on Facebook, this is the Latino Shangri-La. It's live and let live peacefully and happily. Until we got, that Trumper, the chimpanzee that came from Dallas to shoot us in Walmart.
Yeah.
Yes.
Till then, I always told my family, I don't think we'd ever have a mass shooting like that in El Paso, Texas. We just are just so laid back. And it had to be imported. And I still say he was groomed through Trump.
Yeah.
Trump organizations and rhetoric, but also active organizations on the computer.
Let's talk a little bit about how you see the gay community in El Paso today.
Well, I don't have much to do with it. I mean, I stood back from all that because it's no longer in my path.
Right.
But, you're lucky I'm doing this because I don't usually talk. There's been some guy that has worked up the El Paso Times for years trying to get an interview for a book that he wants to write on. And I don't have much to do with it. But what I've seen, through Izzy, I see a lot of stuff on it. Well, not so much you, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not, I don't really go out very much.
Right.
But I like to support the community.
Right.
But that's what I was going to say. Back when you first started, the gay community centered around the bars. I mean, there was no other way. That was our, even when I first came out and when I started going to the LP in the mid 80s, I mean, you felt like you were part of a club and all of our life revolved around the bars, not just the bars.
Exactly.
And now I'm able to be an active member of the gay community, independent of the bars. And so
that's the main change. I'm proud and grateful that it's moved on. And there is still a youth center. There's still, there are all these sports organizations that are very well attended. And because I remember being at a few baseball games when I was still running the club. I supported a lot of lesbians and gay baseball sports, but there weren't a lot. And they weren't very well attended, and it was just always the same people. Now I see that there's tons of them. Lord, pickleball and kickball and also, dodgeball, and that makes me really happy. Away from the bars.
I feel the same way about the Gay Pride Parade and what it's become in Sin City Gay Pride and what they've done, because I think we all remember the very first Gay Pride Parade, which really wasn't much, in El Paso.
Yes.
And a lot of us would go out of town to Gay Pride celebrations and come back and say, "Oh, El Paso is just so boring." And now the Gay Pride parades are loaded with corporations and big companies and big groups and families and everything else. And so that's quite a journey,
Yes.
And so talk a little bit about that. I'm going to talk about that idea of where we started to where we are now.
First parade. What was her name? Terry or... A hooker, an ex-hooker from San Francisco who was now working for Aliviani. She started the first one in El Paso. Funny story about her. She told me, girl, you know what happened to me? One time, I stole my pimp's drugs, and I was taking off and walking down, what is it, Market Street, the main drag in San Francisco. I was walking, and lo and behold, I see him. He wasn't supposed to be anywhere in the area or home for hours, and I see him. He starts running after me, and I start running off like a whore in hell. Running! And I turn around to see where he was at, and wham, ran in head first into a parking meter. That was the thing. That's why she brought it up, because we were sitting in my patio, discussing the parade and what was going to go on, and she started, and I go, "Why are you rubbing your tits?" And then she told me that story. But she was the first one. Out of the kindness of her heart, nobody took her seriously. Everybody badmouthed her because it was her name. It had to be Terry, and badmouthed her because of this hooker from Frisco is, in Aliviana, this ex-drug addict is running his birthday. They were embarrassed to do it.
Could you have imagined the progress that has been made back then? Could you have imagined that's what you all were hoping for, right?
That's what we were not.
That's what you were fighting
for. That's what we were working for.
Okay.
I mean, the last gay pride thing I threw when I closed off the block, I wanted, all sorts of events going on in the big in one of the parking lots for the kids, because I had seen some people bring their kids once, but it was too adult for them, and that I didn't. So I started working with them, but business partners and certain people involved thought I was insane. They wanted the whole sex, right? Which I think is ridiculous. There's more to the gay community as sex than sex. That's the old way of thinking.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I know that worked at the Castro in the 70s. It's worked, and there's always going to be that leather group or whatever, and they're very hypersexualized, and that's fine, and that's a part of our community.
Exactly.
However,
but it's not the end all be all, and that's what they want it all to be.
And if you're going to have a gay pride celebration in El Paso, it's got to reflect the spirit of this community. And let's face it, this community is very family-centered. It's not as sexually forward, or at least not overtly sexually forward, as other communities. And so I think that it's only appropriate that a gay pride celebration should reflect that.
Yes, I agree completely. And that's what I was trying to work for. But then I got the wild hair in my ass when I said, it's harder and harder to fill the place. I don't have the strength to fight anymore. I hate, absolutely despise the person I've become. It's too much. And so I said, when I got faced with the challenge right before Halloween, October 2012, I said, fuck it, close the place. Jesus had been making me stay on for a couple of years, not close. You can't do it. I've had enough. And I said, you're the first one I think I've ever mentioned the reason. I just didn't like who I had become. And things were changing, and I didn't have the strength to go along with that change. I could support, the people who were changed, but I couldn't do it anymore. So
Gilbert, I think that's very graceful. Yeah. I think that there's something to be said about knowing when it's your time to pass the baton and say, time for me to exit.
I'm being equated with Biden now. I feel so old.
It's wisdom.
It was time to be in other hands, because the people I was surrounded with were not ready to move on.
Right.
I don't think, they wanted the old way. That is my main concern is, why go to the past? The past no longer exists. You can't relive the past. Why worry about the future? You can't do anything for it. What's gonna happen is gonna happen. Enjoy the present and pave the way for others. Love the present journey, minute by minute, and pave the way for those who can accomplish.
Gilbert, this has been a very effortless conversation. I could sit and talk to you for 3 days and learn things from you. And so we appreciate your time. Thank you.
Oh, no, thank you. I have a lot of friends of different spiritualities and religions, admitted to a couple of covens. It's not that I practice. They've told me that it's a great changes are happening, and the things that they predicted have come true. A couple of things, like everyday little things that have shocked me. But so I think it's time before I kick off.
That was a fun conversation with Gilbert, wasn't it, you guys?
I loved listening to Gilbert's stories. I just loved talking to him. I've known him for so long that it was really, really heartwarming and touching and funny.
He's hysterical. And he really embodies to me what a strong, old school queen is all about. He's got that strength, he's got that sarcasm, he's got that wit. He's still with it very much in the moment. He's still very much, contemporary. And underneath all of that bravado, he's still just a sweet, genuine, nice person.
Absolutely. And the history that he carries with him is incredible. It's from personalities to events to places. I couldn't keep all of that in my head.
I was in awe by the fact that he called El Paso the Shangri-La of this Latino Shangri-La. When it's like, I've always thought of El Paso being somewhat demure and like kind of calm. Like you'd never suspect that there was this underbelly of life, back in the day.
Well, I think he meant it more like, that we've got really a paradise here and we don't even realize that. And it was interesting from the perspective that he was a pioneer of the gay community in El Paso, and even the skirmishes or all the proms that he had, if you'll notice, that really isn't part of our history here in El Paso, which is interesting because the big part of history in celebrating queer history this month particularly is things like Stonewall and the riots and the AIDS Memorial and all these things that really were dramatic and at times violent. In El Paso, it's truly just been a very nice coexistence.
In essence, it is a Shangri-La for the gay community because we are sans so much a revolution or need for a revolution. What we've got here is a nice coexistence in our society here.
Right, and as we celebrate Queer Pride, it was just important for us to talk to somebody like Gilbert, who really has seen it from almost, certainly he's not the first gay in El Paso.
Right.
He wasn't the first drag queen in El Paso, which he, obviously gives props to all the ones that come before him. But honestly, in terms of putting the gay community on the map in El Paso, there is no denying that he is a pioneer, and so he stands out as an icon of queer history in El Paso.
He's walked every step along the way that this gay community has developed.
And in some cases in heels.
Yeah, exactly.
And marched his ass all the way to Dallas in this gay El Paso.
Sometimes with even more makeup than I would have.
Right? So as we celebrate Queer History Month, we wish you all a happy month and that we keep in mind where we came from because it does inevitably dictate where we're going.
Know your past and you'll know your future. We'd love to hear from you. Email us at feedback@queeronda.com or visit our website and leave a comment.